Welcome back to another episode of AI Unlocks for the Future of Marketing. My name is Megan Starkey and I'm your host, along with my two AI avatars. And today we're focused on enterprise AI adoption. But we're really going to be focused on how well executives are navigating this challenge of creating new business processes and workflows around this new technology of AI.
We've got some fascinating sources for this one.
We do.
Insights from McKinsey on digital transformation. And one thing that's striking is that getting this AI orchestration right might be the defining business challenge of our time.
I think you're absolutely right. It's not just about implementing a new piece of software anymore.
Right.
This is about a fundamental shift in how companies operate.
Exactly.
But McKinsey also cautions against starting too small.
Yeah.
Pilot projects are tempting. But to really move the needle, you need a bold vision and a commitment to transforming a significant part of the business.
I think on one end of the spectrum, we do see those enterprises that are demonstrating a sustained competitive advantage, like they're doing things that up to this point have been completely inconceivable. Yes, they had a bold vision. They said, we're stopping everything we're doing. We're going to give this strong executive CEO sponsorship, a ton of funding, and we're going to make it work. The caution, though, is, don't discourage even large enterprises from taking a pilot to scale approach. You need to have proofs of concepts and things like that. So it's not either or, it's really both and.
It's like repainting a room when what you really need to do is renovate the entire house.
Exactly, but you're not going to do that without putting swatches up on the wall.
A very common mistake.
Yes.
When companies approach digital transformation.
A lot of companies get that wrong.
So it's not just about the tech, but it's about leadership as well. Executive sponsorship is critical, but it can't just be the CEO saying we need more AI.
Right.
The entire leadership team needs to be on the same page about this with a clear and articulate vision for what AI can achieve within their marketing organization.
Yes, absolutely critical. And how is that vision being informed? Because that vision is going to be largely dependent on really understanding what the capabilities are, what preparedness needs to happen. Points of view and expertise has to come from so many different interconnected domains. And that process of gathering all the right inputs needs to be really well orchestrated. Because I'll tell you, when that top team comes together and says, this is what we think that we can achieve, and the workforce isn't aligned, or that vision isn't informed from a realistic perspective, then you've got more challenges to confront than you're even aware of.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask our listeners, does your leadership team have that shared vision for AI in marketing?
That's a great question, and I would invite everybody to send an email with that answer.
Yes.
And even with the right vision, companies often stumble when it comes to talent.
And McKinsey makes a really compelling point about the importance of having in-house talent.
Yes, and it's natural to outsource, especially at the early or growth stages. But really looking to the future, AI is going to be the core business driver, and the entire workforce, top to bottom, needs to be AI skilled relative to their specific function.
Of course.
But their research shows that digital leaders who own a core bench of talent in-house are the ones that are really pulling ahead.
They really highlight the importance of specific roles as well.
Yes, this I agree
Product
with.
owners, UX designers, data scientists.
Yes.
All critical drivers in successful AI adoption.
And it's not even just about the individual
Right.
roles, but how they all work together.
Yeah.
And this really gets to the heart of why we call it restructuring the enterprise. We talk about the
Yes.
importance of agile methodologies or bringing together these cross-functional teams, or in transformation, sometimes they're called pods, that bring all the right perspectives together to drive rapid advancement.
I like that.
So imagine a small, nimble team within your organization
Okay.
that is dedicated to a specific AI initiative.
Yeah.
And they're empowered to experiment and iterate quickly.
Like a supercharged, extra specialized product team.
That's powerful.
That's the power of Agile in an AI-driven world. So how can your organization build a culture that truly embraces this kind of experimentation and learning?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And it leads us to the very practical challenge of building the right foundations for AI. Luckily, there's a lot of guidance out there.
Yes, and in fact, I have documentation that I can share that really helps prioritize a roadmap that brings together all these critical factors that have to be considered. For instance, data readiness across different areas of the organization that you want to pilot in, and overall, if those two things are separate, looking at key assessment factors that will determine what you should be doing now, what you should be developing next, etc., while also evaluating your core infrastructure, your cloud platforms, your development environment, basic security, and then you gradually build your MLOps capability. But this really assumes that all enterprises are going to start with needing an MLOps team, which you don't if you're not building your models in-house.
And MLOps being?
Think of MLOps as a set of practices that bring the rigor of software engineering to machine learning.
Okay.
It helps you manage the entire life cycle of your AI models, from development to deployment to monitoring.
So they mention a lot of technical tools in these guides. Kubernetes, CI/CD pipelines, data governance frameworks.
Yeah.
It sounds really
Yes,
overwhelming.
but it's important to understand that you don't have to have everything in place from day one.
You
But
don't.
you do need to understand where you stand in terms of infrastructure data readiness.
Right.
And then prioritizing the steps to move towards a more mature state.
Exactly.
I agree.
So what level is your organization at right now?
And even with a solid roadmap, there are always going to be obstacles.
Oh, of
Well,
course.
one that comes up again and again and that I've lived through myself is this idea of technical debt.
Ah, yes, the hidden tax that can really slow down AI adoption.
All those shortcuts and compromises made in the past that lead to a complex and fragile technology landscape.
They really do.
And the guides really emphasize the importance of actually quantifying this debt.
Okay.
Figuring out how much it's actually costing you in developer time and lost opportunities.
Yes.
Then you can start prioritizing its reduction.
It's usually the people who are closest to the work that understand what this technical debt is. And without access and visibility with senior leaders, it's really hard for them to communicate these needs or that these difficulties exist, which is why assessing this needs to be a part of some of the first discovery phases of AI. It needs to be led by, well, or at least sponsored by senior people in the organization. I was talking to someone the other day who talked about shifting left.
Is shifting left with DevSecOps.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Essentially embedding security best practices throughout the AI development lifecycle.
Right.
So you can build robust and secure systems from the ground up.
And this attention to detail also extends to code quality and consistent standards.
For sure.
The guides offer recommendations for things like version control testing frameworks and minimizing code complexity.
All important.
So how are you advocating for this proactive tactical debt management and security within your own team?
Well, like I said before, you can't manage what you don't measure. So the first step is just knowing that it's an issue that needs to be looked at.
These are great questions for any leader driving AI adoption.
Yes.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about scaling those initiatives effectively.
Yeah, so I think this is actually a good time to talk about MLOps. Can you speak to that for our listeners?
MLOps is about automating as much of the AI process as possible.
Okay.
Data management model, development, deployment monitoring, and doing it all with an eye towards continuous improvement.
And there's some interesting concepts worth highlighting. Can you expand?
It's like feature stores.
Yes.
These centralized repositories for the data that fuels AI models.
Right.
And anomaly detection, which helps ensure data quality and reliability.
It's all connected.
It's fascinating how these technical elements tie back to business outcomes.
Absolutely. AI models aren't static. They need to be continuously monitored and improved,
Right.
especially as the data landscape evolves.
Yeah, and I'll just add that even with the best MLOps practices, there's still always this challenge of data management, which is a
Yes.
difficult thing to get right, especially for established companies that have had a lot of time for errors to compound.
Right.
One source cites a startling statistic.
Okay.
70% of AI development efforts can be spent on just data wrangling.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
It's a lot of wasted time and resources.
Imagine the wasted resources and missed opportunities.
And this really highlights why the data product concept is gaining so much traction.
So what is it?
It's about treating data as a valuable asset,
Okay.
curated and packaged for easy consumption across the organization.
Exactly. Data has to be a product so that that product can be managed.
So instead of each team struggling to access and clean the data they need,
Right.
they can draw from these prepackaged data products.
Yes, I mean, think how important it is to have a single source of truth for any activity in the business that is informed by data. And data is the soul, it is the engine that powers AI. So if there's anything wrong with it, AI is done before it starts. So there needs to be ownership, responsibility, accountability there.
For sure.
Like data domain stewards who oversee the quality and governance of specific data areas,
Right.
data product owners and data quality analysts, all ensuring that data is managed effectively and ethically.
Absolutely a must. And remember, this is not your data science team. This is not your data analytics team, or it can be, but this is really a new domain of expertise.
It's a fascinating evolution that underscores the impact AI is having on how we work.
I know, and it's just one example.
The journey has just begun.
Wow. So much to unpack there.
Yes, there's a lot, and I'm sure we're going to be getting a lot of follow-up questions, but it goes back to this earlier point about navigating this being the defining business challenge of our time. It really emphasizes this is not about keeping up with tech trends.
Right.
It's about a much deeper rethink of how we can operate in the age of AI, which is just so crucial to be planning for.
It is.
Which makes me think about the rewired enterprise and agile methodologies. Are there any examples from the McKinsey material that illustrate how companies are putting those principles into practice?
Absolutely. One example that stands out is this idea of breaking down traditional silos and creating these cross-functional pods that are focused on specific business outcomes.
Yeah, and this idea isn't radically new. I mean, we've had cross-functional teams and pods. I think the difference here is what players are represented in those pods and what is their level of decision-making authority.
They're almost like mini companies within the larger organization.
Exactly.
Empowered to make decisions quickly and iterate rapidly.
It sounds like a radical shift away from the hierarchical structures
It is.
that we're used to in many large organizations.
It's like product model plus. But what about the practical challenges, like getting buy-in from departments, rethinking job roles and responsibilities, right? We have to acknowledge that this kind of transformation really does take time and emphasize the importance of carefully planning change management, having a strategy, clear communication. You really have to focus on building consensus, and this is not a flip the switch kind of change at all. So how do you measure success in this kind of transformation? Traditional metrics like return on investment are not necessarily going to capture the full picture, just given the complexity and scope, right? So it speaks to this broader shift on how we think about value creation in this new AI age. So it's not just about, I'm going to optimize my existing process. We have to create an entirely new value proposition, maybe even new industries that we can't fully imagine yet, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing that's coming. So we need to think, again, just bigger, more broadly, and look beyond traditional metrics. So I think it requires a certain comfort with ambiguity and a willingness to embrace experimentation and learning as really
interesting
central core organizational values. So the organizations that are already set up for that are definitely going to be ahead.
Exactly.
And in fact, one of the biggest mistakes that we see organizations making is neglecting the human side of change management, right? So it's not just about the strategy, it's about how on board and emotionally invested your workforce is in making it come alive. I think if there was one key takeaway, I would say that AI adoption is so much more than just about the technology. It's really about organizational design, culture, leadership. How do we create value in this digital age, right? So those are things that have nothing to do with technology. And it's a tall order. But it's also an incredibly exciting time to be at the forefront of this transformation. And I know that we have a lot of listeners who are grappling with these challenges. So I think the key is you've got to start somewhere, take a strategic approach, and be willing to learn and adapt along the way, and don't be afraid to make bold moves.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Let's dive into a topic that's particularly relevant for executives who are building data-driven organizations.
Okay.
The concept of the data product.
Yes.
It's becoming increasingly clear that data isn't just a byproduct of operations.
Right.
It's a valuable asset in its own right.
Exactly, especially now. And AI is starting to alert companies to this idea that your data has an enormous amount of potential. And the data product concept is really a way to unlock that. So I've heard it described as curated and packaged data for easy consumption across the organization. We talked about that earlier, right? With the idea of data as a product. And what that looks like in practice is basically shifting our mindset away from seeing data as just like raw material that flows through the organization to seeing it as a finished product. So it's ready to be used, it's ready to be reused by different teams and applications, just like any other product.
Precisely.
Data has a product lifecycle. So you design it, you develop it, you test, deploy, all of that, and you maintain it to maintain a specific business needs. So an essential question that has to be asked in the data management practice is, how is this data going to be accessible to the right people at the right time for the right reason? And that requires intentionality. Whereas for a lot of companies, data is like an afterthought. But so I think you had an example of a real world situation that kind of underscores this point, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. This company faced a common challenge. Customer data scattered across hundreds of applications, leading to inconsistencies, inefficiencies, and even regulatory compliance issues.
It's a familiar story.
So familiar.
It is.
How do they address this with a data product approach?
They started by mapping out their key business use cases and identifying the specific data elements they needed. Then they created a set of data products, each focusing on a particular domain or customer segment.
Interesting.
These data products were designed to ensure data quality, consistency, and accessibility.
And what were the results?
Impressive. They achieved significant cost savings, improved regulatory compliance, and even unlocked new business opportunities by centralizing and streamlining their customer data.
That's a compelling case for a strategic approach to data management.
Well, it certainly is necessary, right? Because you absolutely have to have this to drive value.
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of a clear data strategy.
Yes.
Strong data governance and a culture of data literacy across the organization.
But
well, and the other thing too is that designing data products is just one piece of the puzzle. You also have to consider how these data products are going to be consumed. So if you think about, okay, where does data go in the organization?
Okay.
It feeds reporting systems. It powers advanced analytics. It feeds into all different types of digital applications. It's shared with external partners and agencies.
So data products need to be designed with flexibility and versatility in mind.
Exactly.
It really also underscores the importance of having a robust data platform that can support storage, processing, delivery of all of these data products at scale.
This brings us back to the foundational elements of AI adoption we discussed earlier.
It does.
Cloud infrastructure, data pipelines.
MLOps, yes, exactly. It's all related.
Right.
And because so many pieces of the puzzle have to be looked at and rethunk, AI is really not a technology challenge. It's a business design challenge.
We've covered so much ground today.
We have.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on the importance of security.
Yes, about which a whole podcast could be done.
Okay.
In the context of AI adoption.
It's a critical consideration, especially as AI systems become more integrated into our businesses and lives.
Yeah.
What are some of the key security challenges that organizations need to be aware of?
One of the biggest challenges is the sheer complexity of AI systems.
Okay.
With all the layers of algorithms, data pipelines, and infrastructure components.
Right.
It can be really difficult to identify and mitigate potential vulnerabilities.
And as these systems become more sophisticated, they also become more attractive targets for bad actors who might want to exploit those vulnerabilities.
You're exactly right. We're already seeing examples of AI being used to spread misinformation.
Oh, wow.
Launch cyber attacks, and even manipulate financial markets.
So what can organizations do to mitigate these risks? Can you explain what that means?
It's about embedding security best practices throughout the entire AI development lifecycle, rather than treating it as an afterthought.
So instead of being reactive, being proactive.
Exactly. This means integrating security experts into development teams, automating security testing, and implementing continuous monitoring and threat detection.
It sounds like a big cultural shift, moving from a reactive approach to a proactive one.
It is a shift, and it requires a commitment from leadership to prioritize security as a core organizational value.
Well, and we also have to talk about security in terms of the data that AI systems rely upon. We have to ensure that the data that AI relies on is stored, used, managed ethically and responsibly.
Absolutely. Organizations need to be transparent about how they're using data, obtain informed consent from individuals, and implement appropriate safeguards to protect sensitive information.
Right. And in the next, 4 years, we're going to see a lot of regulation going away. And this is a whole other conversation, but it's going to be incumbent upon enterprises to do the right thing. And look, it's not just about doing the right thing morally. I mean, organizations that don't take data privacy seriously are going to be facing some very serious legal, financial, customer backlash problems. So essential to toe the lines.
We've covered leadership culture, infrastructure, data management, and security. Is there anything else that comes to mind as we think about the challenges and opportunities of enterprise AI adoption?
Well, we haven't covered explainability. Did you want to talk about that?
As AI systems become more complex and their decisions have a greater impact on our lives, we need to be able to understand how those decisions are being made.
So it's not enough to just trust that the AI is doing its job.
Right.
We need to be able to understand its reasoning.
Exactly. That's where concepts like explainable AI or XAI come into play.
Right.
XAI techniques aim to make AI systems more transparent and understandable, enabling humans to audit their decisions, identify potential biases, and ensure that they're aligned with our values and objectives.
It sounds like a critical area for further research and development as AI evolves.
That's exactly right. And we can all just imagine the potential negative impact of not having a human in the loop with these types of things. And so we'll reserve that for another episode.
I couldn't agree more.
To summarize, it's clear that enterprise AI adoption is a complex challenge that requires a holistic approach, addressing not only the technological aspects, but also the organizational, cultural, and ethical dimensions.
That's a great summary.
All right, that's what we have for you today. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please reach out. Email is in the show notes. And we'll see you next time on AI MLOps.